The year is 2030. Imagine this. You are the supreme commander of a hostile superpower. You have the ships, the soldiers, the technology, and the political will, and you have just given the order to invade the United States. There is no United States Navy, no Marines, no drones. They are gone, completely gone. Just the land, the people, and the infrastructure remain. It sounds easy, right? Like planting your flag on the White House lawn by next month. Let me stop you right there, because you are about to walk into the deadliest logistical meat grinder in human history. You think it is a land war. That is wrong. This is not tanks versus troops. This is physics, geography, economics, and millions of armed civilians waiting behind every blade of grass, waiting for the exact moment you become overconfident. Before we go any further, press the subscribe button if you want to see more deep dives into history, economics, and the terrifying what-if scenarios that almost no one else dares to break down. Trust me, you will want to stay. Now let's talk about the oceans. Two massive walls of salt water, the Atlantic Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, sitting there and quietly laughing at your supply chains. Let us say you attempt to cross from Europe, which is 3,000 miles of nothing but open water. From Asia, it is 6,000 miles. That is not a voyage. That is a slow-motion death sentence. During the Second World War, crossing the English Channel to reach Normandy was only a fraction of that distance, and even that required years of planning, millions of tons of supplies, and the full economic output of 3 superpowers. Now, you want to do something 60 times harder. Good luck. And when you finally reach the coastline, where exactly are you going to land? The coastline of the United States is not a friendly beach. The West Coast is filled with rocky cliffs and dangerous currents, with only a handful of ports capable of handling heavy armor. The East Coast is filled with swamps, shallow waters, and dense urban areas packed with people who already know how to use firearms. And every single port, every crane, and every dock can be destroyed faster than your first tank can roll onto land. You might think you can simply drive through Canada or Mexico instead, but Canada is a frozen maze of forests, rocks, and lakes, where every major road funnels you into narrow choke points where a small number of defenders with explosives can destroy an entire convoy. Mexico offers arid deserts, rivers, vast empty stretches, and supply lines so long that you might as well walk. By the time you reach the interior of the country, your tanks are running on fumes, your troops are exhausted, and every inch of ground has turned into a kill zone. And this is only the first phase. Let us pause for a moment. Leave a comment below and be honest. If you had to pick a landing spot for an invasion, where would you try? Florida, Texas, Alaska. Just remember, every single choice is a trap. Now, picture what happens after the first shock fades, after the maps are studied, and after the bravado cools, because this is the moment every would-be invader quietly crashes into the wall they never saw coming. The realization that the United States is not just land you cross, but a system you have to carry on your back every single day you remain there, and that weight grows heavier by the hour. Supply lines stretch until they snap. Fuel becomes more valuable than ammunition. Spare parts turn into gold. Every mile forward multiplies the cost of holding what you already took. Not in theory, but in cold logistical mathematics that never sleep. This is where the fantasy collapses, because occupying territory is not the same thing as controlling it. Control requires people, roads, power, food, water, communications, and a population that does not cooperate. In the United States, that population is not passive. It is decentralized, mobile, connected, and accustomed to solving problems without permission. Disruption does not freeze society. It hardens it. That hardening shows up in thousands of small ways that never make headlines, but quietly destroy momentum. Trucks fail to arrive. Networks reroute themselves. Factories shift production. Communities organize on their own. All while the clock keeps ticking against the invader's budget, morale, and political patience back home. Wars are not fought only on battlefields. They are fought in balance sheets and living rooms. This is where the United States becomes uniquely dangerous, not because of cinematic heroism, but because of scale and redundancy. For every system you disrupt, there is a backup. For every backup, there is a workaround. For every workaround, there is a culture that treats inconvenience as a challenge rather than a stopping point. The longer you stay, the less control you actually have. This is why serious planners never worry about the first week. They worry about month 3, month 9, and year 2. When costs explode, gains flatten, and occupying forces become targets not just of resistance, but of time itself. If you are enjoying this clear-eyed breakdown, this is exactly why people stay with Stay Financial Historian, because we talk about power the way it truly works, through incentives, constraints, and unintended consequences rather than slogans. Here is the uncomfortable truth that seals everything. The United States does not need to defeat an invader quickly. It only needs to make staying slightly more expensive than leaving, day after day, week after week, until the math turns against you. No external power can afford infinite pressure, infinite spending, and infinite political risk. Once that realization spreads through leadership, markets, and public opinion, the decision is already made, even if it is never officially announced. That is why history is full of invasions that begin with confidence and end with quiet withdrawals. So ask yourself this: if you were on the other side of that decision, at what point would you pull the plug? Leave your answer in the comments, because it reveals more about strategy than most people realize. If this perspective helped you see the problem differently, share it with someone who still believes wars are won by arrows on maps. Understanding why something cannot happen is often more powerful than imagining how it could. Now, let's talk about terrain, because if you thought crossing the ocean was difficult, this is where the real nightmare begins. Imagine you make it to the coast, against all odds, and now you are staring at mountains that mock every plan you drafted in the war room. The Rocky Mountains stretch for thousands of miles, with peaks rising over 14,000 feet, tunnels that can collapse supply chains, and narrow passes where a small number of defenders can turn entire armored columns into scrap. Move east, and the Appalachian Mountains greet you with dense forests, winding valleys, and choke points every few miles, where hunters, snipers, and local groups know every creek, ridge, and hidden trail. And it is not only mountains. Rivers, canyons, and frozen lakes in winter all become natural kill zones designed to shred an invading force. Geography is not finished with you yet. Every major city becomes a concrete maze where armored vehicles turn into liabilities, streets become traps, and a single ambush can immobilize an entire battalion. Civilians armed with rifles and hunting weapons transform neighborhoods into fortresses. The calculation is simple. Every city you take requires thousands more soldiers to hold it, stretching your supply lines across hostile terrain that cannot sustain your force. This is not theory. History is filled with armies that marched confidently and died quietly in forests, deserts, and valleys before the enemy even finished them off. Imagine trying to push through these zones while feeding, fueling, and commanding an army of hundreds of thousands. Every mile forward weakens your position. Every bridge, tunnel, and mountain pass becomes a potential grave. Air power does not save you. Tree cover, canyon walls, urban sprawl, and weather strip away its advantages, while locals know every hiding place. The terrain does not merely slow you down, it multiplies danger until your advanced military becomes a lumbering target trapped inside a nightmare built by nature. Pause and picture this. You crossed the ocean. You survived the landing. Now, the land itself is working against you. Where do you even place your headquarters? Every decision becomes a trap waiting to close. Leave a comment below. If you had to choose your first inland city to secure, which one would it be? And how long do you realistically last there? Keep that thought, because now comes the most terrifying variable of all: the people. This is the point where even the boldest invader breaks. You might cross oceans, fight mountains, survive deserts, and capture a few coastal cities, but the United States does not surrender. Every blade of grass, every street corner, and every suburb becomes a battlefield. There are over 400 million firearms in the country, more weapons than people by some estimates, and millions of trained veterans who understand ambush, sabotage, and resistance. This is not a militia. This is a population structurally capable of guerrilla warfare. You think capturing Washington will end it. It will not. Texas continues functioning. California mobilizes. Local sheriffs hold more power than any distant authority in their counties. You would need an army larger than any modern force just to attempt occupation, and even then, every highway, every bridge, and every town becomes a threat. Logistics collapse. Fuel, food, ammunition, and spare parts stretch across thousands of miles, while supply convoys are dismantled piece by piece. And then the economy fights back. The United States sits at the center of global trade, finance, and technology. Damage it and you damage yourself. Engineers leave. Systems shut down. Markets panic. Currencies shake. Every step forward drains manpower, money, and morale. Governance becomes impossible. The country is composed of 50 states and thousands of counties, each with its own laws, authority, and identity. Capture one capital and the rest of the nation does not stop. It resists harder. Civil disobedience, sabotage, strikes, infrastructure failures, power outages, water disruptions, and transportation breakdowns all turn into weapons. The longer you stay, the weaker you become, until the entire plan collapses under its own weight. Oceans are impossible. Neighbors are hostile. Terrain is deadly. The population is armed and motivated. Logistics fail. The economy collapses inward. Governance becomes unmanageable. Invading the United States is not a military campaign. It is a suicide note written in miles, dollars, and time. The land, the people, and the systems do the fighting for themselves. You do not need nuclear weapons. You do not need drones. Nature, culture, and infrastructure are the real defense. So here is the final question. If you were the invader, which state or city would destroy your plans first, and why? Share this with someone who still underestimates geography, logistics, and civilian power. The real lesson is simple. The United States is not unconquerable because of armies. It is unconquerable because of mathematics, land, systems, and people. Think about that and stay curious.